It's a great pleasure to welcome to the program Dr. Tommy Weir, renowned speaker, advisor and author on innovative leadership. Dr. Weir, it's good to have you with us on the program.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much.
Emerging markets are often characterized by rapid, unpredictable changes, but they also offer boundless opportunities. Tell us more about the business environment in emerging markets, particularly in the Arab world.
Probably the thing that's most overlooked when you look at the business environment in the emerging markets, and specifically in the Arab world, as you're asked, is recognizing where they are in their business life cycle. So there's kind of this natural assumption that the whole world is a public traded enterprise, as a GE, American Express, Procter & Gamble, et cetera. But when you look and actually lay back down the fundamentals, it's a first generation corporate society. I mean, think about it. When was the first McDonald's? When was the stock market coming online? So if you were to roll back a little bit, you would recognize that basically everybody who's 20 years plus, okay, it's of working age today, grew up prior to a corporate society existing. So that really, you're exactly right. It's boundless opportunity because it's a first generation corporate environment.
How do you explain that China, deemed one of the world's economic powerhouses, and Tunisia are both characterized as emerging markets?
Definitely they are. And if you look at both, okay, obviously, I'm not sure when Tunisia, I'd have to look at my stacks to figure out when they actually got moved into the aspect of the McDonald's. But if you look at both, they're both very young, they're both very infants from a modern perspective, yet you're dealing with two very old societies. The fundamental difference between both is China had a pretty clear direction of clarity from its leadership as to where it was going to go as a country. It fueled the opportunity. It made the step moving from an agrarian society into a manufacturing environment. And if you were to go back over the last 250 years, you would find that markets that did a good job of early growth went from an agricultural society to manufacturing and then advanced onward. Tunisia hasn't made that major step. They haven't made the major first step yet. China did.
The risks of investing in emerging markets is higher than investing in developed markets. Are there lessons to be learned from the 1997 Asian crisis on how emerging markets can be high-risk investment opportunities?
It depends on where you're investing. It's quite interesting, actually, that you brought that up, and I'm laughing because I just sat yesterday with the managing director of one of the large funds that's investing. They've got a $1.5 billion fund investing exclusively in emerging markets. But typically, private equity firms are risk-averse. We want to manage our risk extremely tight. But there's no better place to manage your risk and to look for high return than in the emerging markets, depending on where you invest. So if I went into China right now and I started investing in real estate, it may not be the smartest investment in the world. If I were to go into Pakistan and start investing in coffee shops and look at the things that are going to be coming online, looking at just basically building the retail sector, building that sector, huge opportunities for great return. Educational investments right now. This particular fund is invested in two different school systems that represent 500,000 students. They're getting great returns. So the risk-reward perspective, I think it depends on if you're a sophisticated investor and you really understand the fundamentals of emerging markets, you'll do well. If you're sitting in New York or Boston right now and trying to just place some bets hoping for some decent returns and don't understand the fundamentals of society, good luck.
How do you relate the risk-reward factor in light of the Arab Spring here in the region?
I think that the Arab Spring is going to be almost like nitrous oxide, a turbocharged fuel, okay, for reform that needed to happen, for pent-up demand that was in the markets. And as soon as we see just the tiniest bits of stability to come through, the growth is going to be unbelievable. The Arab Spring the countries that have experienced Arab Spring and the countries that are concerned about experiencing Arab Spring both have the fundamentals are the best in the world right now. They've got the demographic dividend is sitting in their corner right now. They've got great geographical proximity. They've got pent-up demand. They're under-invested markets with the exception of one or two cities. They're primed. They're ready. The question, though, that I have that comes back to that is, what's the private sector going to do? Is the private sector ready for the opportunity that Arab Spring is giving to it?
Often emerging markets have to weigh local political and social factors as they open up their economies to the world. But people in emerging markets are usually accustomed to being protected from the outside world. They're often distrustful of much needed foreign investments.
Yeah, yes, it could be a problem. I mean, the protective side, and actually probably the case comes higher to the surface to me, is there's a comfort in the hierarchical nature of society. The majority of the emerging markets we're speaking of today are largely African and Asian oriented, so the Africa, Middle East, and Asian markets. They're definitely hierarchical societies, so it's not necessarily a protection from the outside as it is a protection even inside. So in that hierarchical environment, I like the comfort that comes. When we push the growth of a private sector, what we're largely saying is, let's take an American or a European style of management of work, and we push that in, and people gravitate back and they're like, wait a minute, we need to take steps. The problem, you don't leap forward in history, you walk forward in history.
Opening up emerging markets doesn't only mean opening up to new work ethics and standards, but also to new cultures, which may change the very fabric of the society. Here in Egypt, there's this issue of national pride. People may resist change.
Okay. Yes, there's definitely national pride. National pride and change they don't necessarily prohibit one from the other from happening. National pride could be the driver, the catalyst for a change agenda. If we were to look back, and sorry to use my home country as an example of this, if you look back at the earlier days of when North America went through great pride environments, it became the catalyst to change. The question is, where's your common enemy? Are you fighting against the rest of the world, or are you earning your right in your place? I think Egypt should take national pride and leverage its geography, leverage what it has, to actually use it for the good, rather than to step back and say to the world, no, we don't want anything to do with you, we're just fine, we're sitting back and we're happy here, but rather figure out the steps it needs to take going forward.
Emerging markets are often short on executives with leadership skills. What advice do you offer corporate leaders who wish to survive in the global economy?
Yeah, quite a bit, and this probably goes to the key word there, and it's understanding what leadership is. It's coming to the essence of that. What we've historically found is we've been doing our research, and what pretty much anybody else has is exactly what there's a tremendous shortage right now. There's a shortage of managerial capability. There's a shortage of leadership capability. Quite frankly, it makes sense, though. All right? If I'm not developed and raised and groomed to be a leader, there's a handful of people that do it naturally and figure out how to do it on their own. The rest are sitting and they're watching examples around them and guessing.
Are leadership skills acquired?
Yes. Definitely. Are you asking that traditional question of, are you made or born a leader? If we're getting into the crux of that, for sure, it's an acquired aspect. I mean, you may have elements of charisma or outgoingness or things that others gravitate towards that you can grow from. And I'm not saying charisma is actually necessarily to be a good leader, but it's definitely acquired. Becoming a leader is a lot like becoming a doctor. Is this fair? You both have an educational basis, but you have to learn it on the job. If we were to come back to your issue...
Your leadership toolkit. What's in there?
That's where I'm heading to right now. The leadership toolkit, if I were sitting right now, and if we were sitting in a room and advising senior executives, whether here in Egypt or across the emerging markets, and said what should be top on your list, number one on their list should be building leadership in their business. Unfortunately, in the emerging markets, coming back to that hierarchical society, saying, Ana Mudir, I sit at the top, okay, I'm the leader, everybody else is, sorry to say it, but opinion or a worker bee here. They need to understand and make the shift. My job as a leader is to build the capability in the business. When you move past 75 to 100 employees, when you move past that threshold, don't anymore. You need other leaders involved. So number one is build leaders. Number two, and this is critical, is communicate and provide clarity. So let's hone in here. Let's get very practical. So let's hone into what's going on right now. So pretty much any given day, whatever the scenario on the street was, comes into the boardroom. So I'm running a company, problem on the street, rumor breaks out, X, Y, and Z is going to happen, the currency is going to be, the value of the currency is going to plummet, whatever the story is. We go into the boardroom. So I'm sitting down with my top leaders and we start playing a game called what if scenarios. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? And we're doing that. While that's going on, all of the employees are sitting back saying, will we have a job tomorrow? What's going to happen here? What's happening there? What's happening here? What's happening here? That group goes out They go to the coffee shops, they go to the cafes, and what do they ask? What's happening in your company? What's happening here? What's happening here? And all of a sudden the spiral goes down. They go home, and what do they talk about? The same thing. They come back. So at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, I could have had this level of motivation. By 8 a.m. on Wednesday, I'm down here. Well, our whole exec team's sitting in a boardroom saying, what if scenarios? They need to get out of the boardroom, back with their people, provide direction, clarity, and look into the future. The next thing they need to do is not be controlled by the circumstances. They need to lead the circumstances. I have a business. Okay? Today, I have a business selling cars. Tomorrow, I'm still going to sell cars. What I need to do now, though, is prepare for growth. Fair? The market is quieter in Egypt right now. It's a bit quieter. It's a bit slower. This is the opportunity to make preparation for the future. And for the businesses we've interviewed with, we're not seeing that go on. We're seeing a wait and see. We'll sit still. Let's wait and see how it breaks out.
So what difference does leadership make in the private sector?
You know, if you look across the private sector, some days you would almost wonder if it makes any at all. If you look at really the level of investment that goes on. But there's quite a few studies that have been done around the world. And when your leadership effectiveness is in the upper quartile, it impacts every single balance sheet issue you can look at and every scorecard. So your diluted earnings per share are higher. Your total shareholder return is higher. Your employee engagement is higher. Your quality standards are higher. So what difference does it make? It makes a difference on your balance sheet. I go through and I still really grapple with is it's common sense, isn't it? The better a leader is, the better an organization performs. The better an organization performs, the more money the business makes. At the end of the day, the majority of the businesses we're dealing with are family-owned enterprises. It still has, you can name the owner. It's not a shareholder. It's not a piece of paper. So you can name that owner. They want to extract the maximum value from their asset. Knowing that, I don't understand why they've shifted it from looking at it from a value creation perspective to looking at the cost side. So for some reason, I don't know if I'll ever understand this, but for some reason, there's a line that comes down and they say, oh no, if it's leadership, it's a cost. But rather looking at it saying, that is actually our value that we're going to generate for the future.
And yet, 51% of corporations don't. What are the risks?
They're significant. I mean, I heard it said recently, it's quite good. Looking at investing in leadership, this is going to involve basically getting the right people in the position, giving them the opportunity, training, the development side and all that. Somebody asked recently, I said, which is a greater risk to you? Investing in your people that may leave or not investing in them and them staying? And I thought, that's a pretty good example of that. I mean, if you think about it. Now, what's the huge risk? So if you look at a normal organization, it falls into a pyramid. So every organization does. The bottom 80% of it would be the individual contributors, the typical employees. That 80% reports into the next level, the frontline managers. They represent 10%. This 10% is the part of the organization that gets the least amount of investment, the least amount of attention. They're, quite frankly, the most inexperienced as well. So they could be argued they're probably the weakest part of your business. But that 10% is managing on the day-to-day basis the 80%. They determine whether somebody wants to work, works hard, does the right things, is communicated with, gets the focus. So when you come back and say 50% don't invest it at all, they do nothing for it, from my perspective, common sense says you're putting yourselves at a huge risk level. Of course, productivity is not at the level you want. Of course, senior leaders are sitting back and saying, we don't have the management capability in the business. I don't have it because I'm not investing in it. Of course, my employees aren't performing the best they can because I'm not investing in making the managers as good as they can so they can get there. It's a pretty simple, equation.
Dr. Tommy Weir, advisor and author on innovative leadership. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Right. Thank you so much.